as soon as you crack off a bit, the advantage disappears, you know, quite quickly. Now, the low aspect sails are also much more forgiving. The sheet angle and the sheet position and the sheet tension aren't as critical. When you have a high, tall, skinny sail, the sheet tension is very critical. A half an inch of sheet tension is a huge amount on a really tall, skinny sail. When a long-footed sail, half an inch of sheet tension isn't that big a deal. You wouldn't really notice that much difference. So the high aspect sails are a little bit tougher for the average bear to trim and deal with. Okay, mainsail. You have your two big main controls are your sheet and your vang. Now it's a question of how much do you, and your mast ram thing, but we'll leave the mast ram out for a minute. The question is how much sheet do you put on versus how much vang do you put on? Now, do most of you guys vang, sheet, or a little bit of both? Use your vang. Does anybody have a rhyme or reason to how much vang they put on versus how much sheet? You put more vang on and less in stronger winds, and less sheet, or vice versa?
More vang and more wind.
More vang and more wind, yeah. More vang and more wind. Was you guys racing on Saturday or Sunday this weekend? One day real light? Saturday real light. And I would say on Saturday, I heard it was like 3-4 knots of breeze. I would say probably you would have no vang. And were you sailing with no vang on Saturday? Because you really need the sail to be open. You want it to twist. So you don't want anything pulling that boom down. The weight of the boom is enough when it's blowing 3 knots to tension the lead to your mainsail. So you want to probably get your bridle, allow your bridle to bring the sail as close to the center as you possibly can, and then have your sheet fairly soft and no vang. As the breeze comes on, you're going to want to put more vang. I'd say when the wind's 6, 7, 8 miles an hour, you're going to start using more vang and more vang and more vang as the breeze comes up. And the vang pulls the boom down, but also pushes the boom forward. Okay, and that helps to bend the mast. Your boom here, and your vang is an angle like this, more or less. So the vang pulls the boom down, but it also pulls the boom forward, probably more forward than down. So when you really crank your vang on, it is pushing really hard against the mast here, and it causes the mast to bend. Unless you take your boom ram thing off, if you have a mast ram thing off. You also have, on all the boats here, you have the ability to pull the mast forward down here as well, right? You all have that block and tackle thing. So in light air, I'm sure you're using those a little bit.
Yeah,
You're putting pre-bend in. The mainsail's cut. There's 2 ways basically when you make a sail to put shape in the sail. You have your basic triangle sail, your mainsail. There's all these seams in here. And each one of those has a little bit of seam taper in it. Okay, so it's a little curve in each seam, but when you sew those together, they make shape. And then you have the front of the sail has a curve cut in it. Okay, it's called left curve. And that off center, off a straight line, might be, I'm guessing albacore, it's probably around 12 centimeters. Okay, so 4 or 5 inches of curve in here. So if the mast is straight, that curve is going to sit right behind the mast. You can have a really deep forward sail when the mast is sitting straight. It'll be drafted right at the front. Okay, so you don't want that. You want to pull that out so the shape is more of an even shape. But in light air, without the mast puller, you're not going to be able to get that because there's no way of bending your mast without cranking the vang on. In light air, we don't want to crank the vang on because that makes the leads too tight. So you have your mast puller, and you pull that forward until that big knuckle in the front of the sail disappears. Okay, so you may pull that forward until you get 3 inches of mast bend or something, and that doesn't do anything for tensioning your rigging. In fact, it probably softens your rigging. So light air, mast puller on, no vang, and sheet with the main sheet. As the breeze comes on, what happens when the breeze comes on is you start putting vang on, you start putting sheet on, you start putting all these things on. Now you can't control the mast bend. What happens now is the mast bends too much. So that's when then you've got to put your ram on the other way, if you have it. Some of the boats I see, you get a line titer on it, but you have something to prevent the mast from bending. And if the mast bends too much, it's more than this luff curve accommodates, then your mainsail is going to go completely flat. And at the same time, your headstay is going to get softer and softer as your mast compresses. The main gets flatter, but your jib stay is now going to get softer because the whole mast is bending and the whole thing is getting softer. Your jib stay is starting to get looser as well. All your rig is getting looser. So you got to do whatever you can to get that mast back up to straight. Or this, the magic number say is 4 inches of mast bend. With 4 inches of mast bend, if you lock it into that thing, the mainsail is got good shape, your jib halyard's as tight as you want it to be, and the sails look good. In 25 knots of air, without the ability to stop the mast from bending, you're going to get 6 or 7 inches of mast bend. The main's going to be overly flat, and your jib stay's going to get soft. In 4 knots of air, and your mast is too straight, your mainsail gets too deep, your jib halyard's probably pretty tight, and you can't get shape of the main. So you have to kind of work around this magic number of 4 inches of mast bend. So you have to, artificially induce it in light air, and in heavy air you have to use the other things you have to keep it from bending too much. And that's kind of what those controls are all about. And you have to mess with them a little bit. I'm saying 4 inches of mast bend is the ideal amount. It's not always the ideal amount, but you're going to have, you always want some mast bend. I'm talking about upwind here.
How about in super heavy wind? Does it make sense to just tend to just start reefing on the bang, and then you get this really super tight beach? You get hit by a gust and just knock you over all the time.
When some of the stuff, I know the guys are starting to use, Jeff and Ian Brace on those guys are starting to use more vang in heavier breezes than they were using before. And which part of the reason why we had to change that luff curve in your sail a bit. What was happening when you're vang sheeting a lot, your mast, because the vang sheeting's here, the mast tends to bend more down low. So the mast bend is a bit more like that, say, a little straighter up here and more down here. When you, and that's with the amount of lead change you want. When the breeze, when you're using less vang and more main sheet, okay, so you're sheeting now hard. That's my fault. So there's less vang here, so you're sheeting more on the leech of the mainsail. Okay, so this is pulling down hard, so the leech is harder. And what happens then is because you're pulling here, the mast bends more up high. You see what I'm saying here? So if you're sheeting with the vang, because of the forward thrust, the mast bends a lot down low. When you back off the vang a bit and put more sheet tension on, the mast is going to be a little straighter down here and a little more bendy up top because you're using more sheet tension, and the sheet's going to load up the leech, and the leech is going to pull the head of the mast back.
If it's blowing like 25 to 30, how do you perform your sheet?
You know what? When it's blowing 25 to 30, but that's a lot. But it's blowing even 15 or more, you really got to work that main sheet. I mean, you've got to. That main's going to be in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out like crazy, And you've really kind of. I don't know how you guys, but the guys are getting the boats almost planing upwind now, eh? And you put the board back a tiny bit, and hike like hell, and work that mainsail, and they're going fast upwind, but boy, it's a ton of work. I'm watching these guys, boy, I'm not out that boat right now. But that's work. But when the switch, these guys are switching to using more vang sheeting than main sheet tension. And because of that, I was saying in that mainsail we did for them, we actually flattened the sail a bit more at the top because they're not sheeting as hard on the main sheet, so that their mast is bending more down low and not as much up high. These are all small sail-making things, and we're talking a few millimeters of difference in the shape of the sail, but it's just something that I saw in some of the videos that they took that we try something different.
John, when you're talking about the boom bang and keep bending the mast, isn't there a pivot point where the shrouds hit the mast? So, like if you're driving the gooseneck forward, it's got to pivot off the shroud, so the top of the mast is actually going back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're pushing. Yeah, you're pushing the middle of the mast forward, right? When you're bang sheet, you're just taking your boom and you're pushing as hard as you can. So that force induces bend more down low than up high. If you didn't have the vang at all and just really pulled on the main sheet, it's a more even bend. So it's a little more up top. Most of that foot of bend will be in the lower part of the sail. When you use the sheet a lot, most of that foot of bend will be more even, almost more symmetrical all the way up. But when you use the vang, it does kind of drop that whole thing down a bit, and the top stays a little bit straighter because the bottom's sort of taking up that bend. This is a little technical, but
I guess what you're saying is that when you're pulling on the main sheet, you're actually using the leech to pull down the top of the mast.
and it does,
not
does.
Just driving.
Not driving forward. Yeah, I mean the leech bends the mast a lot. You can see it today. This is probably not breeze today. You can don't use the vang at all. Just pull your main sheet real hard, and you'll see the mast bend. I mean, whatever sheet tension you put on, which is a fair amount, that's bending the top of the mast bend. But if you use but in a breeze, I think most everybody's using a lot more vang than sheet. And the sheet is like a lot of boats, what you call a traveler. You guys know what a traveler is now. Of course, we don't have travelers, but you're using a vang to tension the sail and using the sheet to let the boom in and out, in and out, in and out. And the puffs, you know, it gets puffy, you gotta let the sheet out a foot or 18 inches even, and then pull it back in a lull and let it back out. Keep the boat, you gotta keep the boat flat and driving. You can't let it, the other things when it heels over and you kind of half broach and then you get the boat down and then you wind up again. You've got to get it a consistent angle of heel and a consistent angle of speed. And so your boat's going to be all over the place in a strong wind going upwind. Your bow's going to be up, your bow's going to be down, your main's in and out, your main's back up, but just get it going as fast as you can. I've watched these guys go upwind and they're pretty much planing now upwind with, in 15 knots of breeze, for sure.
So usually sails like a good ship will have 3 ticklers.
Yeah.
Or 3, maybe 4,
Yeah.
depending on the
Yeah.
So which, even on the main, you'll have some ticklers. Which one should be watching what conditions?
Well, on the jib, there's probably 3 sets, 1, 2, then 2 at the bottom. The top telltale, don't get all antsy on the lead trying to get all the telltales flying the same. The top telltale will always break first if the lead's in the right place. So set it up so that when you're sailing along and you start to pitch the boat a bit, the top goes first and then progressively down. Just a little bit early, but not too early. There's people that think that it should all be breaking even all the time, and what ends up happening in the end is you end up the lead too far forward and it never works and it's a disaster. So any sail is better to be a little bit more open than a little bit too closed. So if you move the lead too far forward and you close off the leech of the sail, it's slow. Air on the side of open rather than closed. Okay, for the mainsail, it's the top telltale and top batten is kind of the only one that I kind of use, and you want that to be, flying most of the time. Depending on when it's blowing hard, you don't even worry about the telltales, right? If it's blowing hard, you're just trying to keep the boat going fast, not tip over, and drive the boat as hard as you can. In moderate air like today, you're probably going to want to have that top telltale on top batten flying maybe half the time. I don't even know. Maybe we'll get an idea when we get out there and see. But
Talking about the leech telltale.
yeah, leech telltale. The inside telltales in the main, so I've had them on there. I never really used them for anything. They always seem to work. So they're always flying no matter what you do, unless you're the sail's luffing madly. But yeah,
John, when I'm driving, I'm really looking at the bottom telltales on the jib.
that's your steering. Yeah.
And so where they are is important to me, and I have no clue where they're supposed to be. I presume the jib is designed to have those telltales in a particular place.
Not really. You'd be surprised.